Good evening, Facebook friends and pub theologians. Welcome to another edition of Pub Theology Online. This is my co-host, Bekah McNeel, and we're excited to be with you today. As you know, we've been doing online pub theology now for 8 weeks, so you can go back on our Facebook page and see any of our previous pub theologies with great people like Pastor Max Lucado, Rabbi Samuel Stahl. We've interviewed reporters that have covered the COVID crisis, from the Rivard Report to the Express News to Texas Public Radio, all those pub theologies. You can watch us online. So welcome. It's a Wednesday, another Wednesday evening. And today we got some special guests. We're doing an education panel. We're going to be talking all education here at this pub theology tonight. So it's great to have Bekah because she's the education reporter for 74 Million, an online website that covers all things education, 74 million. And with us, here's our panel today. With us is all these great people, individuals, and leaders in San Antonio. First, we have Patti, Radle, the SAISD board president. We have Superintendent Pedro Martinez, and we have President Dr. Danny Anderson from Trinity University, and education reporter Emily Donaldson from the Rivard Report. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, good to be here.
Good to be here.
Well, you know, it's been an exciting few 8 weeks, maybe 9 weeks now, covering the COVID crisis, and each of y'all had to rearrange how you do life together in your different respected educational circles, whether that's an independent school district or a university, and anything in between, from primary all the way to university here on this panel. And Emily's been covering it, Bekah's been covering it, and we're just excited that y'all can discuss about where we've been and where we're going in this crisis together. So, Bekah.
Yeah. One of the big questions for me has been, what does this shakeup mean for I'm hearing people say not the new normal, the better normal, you know, better things coming. Patti, I think you had an op-ed to that effect saying we don't need to go back to normal, that this is showing us just how dangerous a lot of our inequities were, and now we need to be addressing that. We need to, you know, the system's been disassembled, let's put it back together in a better way. And so I'd love to hear what that looks like from each of your perspectives. Dr. Anderson with higher ed, the K-12 system, pre-K-12 system at SAISD, and then Emily, would love to hear your gleanings from around the city of where you're seeing that start to happen. Y'all just jump in. Don't be shy.
Well, just going back to the statement that I offered in an article that was actually on the Rivard Report about not wanting to go back to normal, but wanting to go back to better, is from the standpoint that one thing that has become so obvious during this time are those things that social workers, counselors, teachers have been talking about for decades regarding the challenges of poverty in San Antonio, but also around the nation, around the world. The inequalities have surfaced so strongly during the COVID-19 crisis, whether it has to do with devices, with children not being able to connect with teachers for lack of devices, whether it's food inequality or lack of resources, lack of security for food. So many things that are just not there for children of poverty. And what that's meant to the district during this crisis of how we have had to step up to bring a sense of equality, a little effort into the equality. But whether it's school issues or housing issues or transportation issues, so many things have come up because of this that have been there for a long time. And so we don't want to go back and not remember what we have discovered during this time. And what does that look like? You know, it's certainly more of a very heavy focus on what life is like for children, for families of poverty. Again, the city has tried to put some attention to housing. I hope people can see that it is a true crisis. I know our district, our zip code 78207 in my community is the one known for the greatest inequality in an urban city. And, that is not what we want to continue. And so it covers all issues, like I said, whether it's education or housing or food or transportation. Will we go back and remember what this has been like for thousands of people in our community? A lot deeper level of suffering, pain, challenges.
Yeah, and for me, just it's been a challenging time because there's so many plans. We're really one of the things that I pride ourselves in San Antonio ISD is that we always have been very thoughtful about our planning. We're very thoughtful about how we roll things out because we're very sensitive to our community and we understand the challenges that exist, especially parents. The challenges that parents have. And so what this pandemic has really forced us to do is to think very fast. We had this challenge of, we already had distributed 16,000 devices before the spring break through various grants, including our Verizon grant, where we had our largest middle schools have one-to-one technology they could take home. And I thought, wow, that's a great victory. And then the pandemic hits, and then I realized, well, no, I needed it in all 48,500 households of mine. Having just 16,000 isn't going to work. And we already were building digital content, but again, it was optional for teachers to use. And then we were put in a position where all 3,200 of my teachers had to be trained immediately on how to leverage all of our digital content tools. And so for us, we've had to move very fast. As you can imagine, just a lot of logistical challenges. But what's been fascinating for me is just watching the creativity of our staff, watching the creativity of our teachers. We could not have done this 5 years ago. I think with all the foundations we've laid over the last few years, we were as prepared as we could be. And I think now for us, as we think about the new year, what we're going to be looking at is all the great lessons that we're learning. So, for example, we've had digital content and lesson plans that have been highlighted by the state. One of my science teachers at Lanier High School, one of my most impoverished high schools, it was something that the state actually stood out as one of the best digital set of lesson plans for the state in science. And so what we want to do is really take the great content that we developed, really look at where we had the most engagement with our teachers, and really use that for just lessons and best practices for next year. We know that the new year is going to have to be a blended model. And one of the things that we also want to make sure is that we're getting more feedback from our parents. One of the things we were starting to just develop was just tools and really working with the schools on how to provide more outreach to parents. Well, if we're going to open up the new school year, I am convinced that's only going to happen if we work with parents right now. We cannot wait till July or August. We have to get their feedback now. So in the next 2 weeks of June, or the first 2 weeks of June, every one of our principals is going to have parent meetings to look at different ways of how we may open the school year up, and also for them to learn the safety guidelines we're going to have in place so that they can be assured that safety is a priority for us.
I've got about 20,000 more questions along those lines as one of your SAISD parents. But first, I do want to hear from Danny Anderson, because Trinity has done already made some moves, I think, that are going to provide data on some big equity questions, mostly around entrance requirements. Would you speak to that?
Yes. So as you look at Trinity and things that we're thinking about coming out of this, and there are just multiple layers of things to share. One of them is, as we think about recruiting students for next year, we have decided that given the challenge of students being able to go to testing locations, we're what is now called test optional. We will use, instead of relying on the SAT and the ACT as primary screening tools, we'll be doing a lot to look at the holistic student record. It's very interesting that this is a move that many people talk about as removing a barrier, that a student who may come from a background that includes obstacles in terms of testing, eliminating the test may level the playing field in different ways for all students. So we're very excited. We went ahead and decided we're not simply going to do it 1 year, but we're going to make a commitment to a 3-year program so that we can test and monitor and understand what kind of an impact going test optional has for us. But speaking more specifically about what we're going toward. Just like Pedro talked about learning lessons from what happened right now, we're working hard to do that. As I think about this next school year, we're doing everything we can to be able to open and have a residential campus. We have many working groups that are looking at all of the different components of what life in community is about, so that we can think about the adjustments that will ensure that everyone on campus is safe. And at the same time, we have learned some really interesting things from using technology. There are people who have been in meetings on Zoom and they've been using the chat function on the side, and they've discovered that people in the past who didn't speak up participate in all kinds of ways. And they've asked, is there a way that we could keep using Zoom when we're back face to face? Because the chat function is a really great way to see all kinds of communication happening in the group. Another thing that we're thinking about is that it is likely, just like Pedro Martinez said, that we will have to do some kind of blended teaching at different points. I can imagine a classroom where the faculty member is present, there may be students with them, but a student may be ill, or a student may say, I have some underlying health problems and I need to avoid that kind of social contact. That person, the professor, may need to be teaching what's called multimodal, both with students present and being able to deliver online to a student who is taking remotely, perhaps living in a residence hall room and just not comfortable sitting only in that physical space in the classroom. So there are a lot of ways that we're looking at what worked and what can we improve upon to think about how we will keep using technology. And I would just echo Pedro in that we learned that not all of our students have equal access to technology. And that if we were to have to go back to a remote learning situation, we've learned a lot about things that we would want to be doing differently to provide a greater level of support so that all students are having an equal opportunity as they're starting. I just want to share one quotation as maybe a last comment. There was this wonderful opinion piece in the New York Times Review Sunday a week ago, and it was about what we lose when we go from the classroom to Zoom. And it was a conversation about what is the dynamic of being face-to-face in the room. And this quotation just sticks with me. As a teacher, I cannot level a deeply unequal playing field. But within the classroom, my students and I can try to forge a community where we listen to one another with respect because of the trust we build together. And so I just share that because I think a lot of what we're talking about is education, but it's also community, and that space of a classroom of people being together is something that we yearn for, and we feel like we do a lot at Trinity to try and promote the opportunity of teachers to really equal the playing field in that space.
I think that is a keen observation that I've heard from a lot of teachers as I've been interviewing, that teaching isn't just about conveying content knowledge. It is about building a learning community.
Mm-hmm.
And while I think Gen Z would tell us it's possible to build community online, it's going to take some tinkering and some changing of our, how we do that. It'll never replace the classroom, and how we do that by necessity is going to take some new skills for a lot of us. And so I've had a lot of choked up teachers talking about how they are hearing the excitement and the joy and the community, or that energy that comes from being social, kind of drop from their kids' voices. And it's hard, and it just reminds you about the emotional components of a classroom, the social and emotional components of a classroom. Emily, I'm wondering what you've been hearing.
I think hearing like the new normal or reopening is a very popular term right now. So I think after Superintendent Martinez and Superintendent Micah were on that city televised briefing, and they said, yes, we'll be open this fall, people kind of jumped and said, of course, the first signs of reopening. But it's really important to know that that's not going to look very similar or maybe at all like what we remember from this past fall. And And I think a lot of those thoughts are still being formed. So whether students are going to be spending their entire day in their classroom, or what extracurricular activities are going to look like, if classes are going to be in shifts throughout the day, if some of it's going to be online, if they're going to be taking online classes at the school in the gym while other students are with their regular teacher. And then the other thought that a lot of the panelists already said is that there were a lot of systems, I think, in place that could not be in place now that everyone's at home and apart, that we're evaluating and seeing what was essential and what was not so essential. So, one example was AP exams went from 4 hours to 45 minutes. And I wondered if any of those kind of alterations will make impacts on the future with, future courses. Are they going to be shortened in the future? Will admissions policies change for the duration going forward? And so that's what I'm really fascinated by, what systems have been revealed to be more or less arbitrary or not as essential, and then what systems have been underlined to be incredibly essential, like internet access, the food that school districts are providing, all of the social emotional supports that teachers provide, all of that.
Yeah, so many times when people want to change something in the education system, they talk about the inertia of these massive systems and just the way things are done, and how, like, well, so, one system can't really just decide they're opt out of the SATs and the ACTs, or you can't just decide. There's so many things that a school system, they kind of move as a big amoeba. And this disruption has been when I was pitching to the 74 why we needed a San Antonio bureau during this, I mentioned how disruption friendly San Antonio ISD happens to be, and that I would be watching how they seized the moment where the disruption has happened for them, to do some of the things that they had been wanting to do, that you guys had been wanting to do already. And so I'm really want to hear more about that, but I also want to make sure that we have a lot of questions popping up, so I think we should probably jump on those.
Yeah, no, that's good. And remember, if you're watching online, if you're watching on Facebook or on YouTube, you can post your comments there, and then we can read them and pull them up, the ones that we feel are good to ask. And so please turn in those comments to this panel or an individual, and we'll try to get to your question. Again, thank you so much for joining Pub Theology Online. You're some great panelists, Dr. Danny Anderson from Trinity University, Patti Radle, the SAISD board president, and Superintendent Pedro Martinez, along with two great education reporters, Bekah McNeel and Emily Donaldson. So all things education. And we do have a question here, and it's kind of piggybacking on what's already been said, but people can comment in a different way. And let me get to the right. You lost us. Is everybody here? We were trying to get a comment, and so here it is, a comment. Here it is from Rebecca. Pedro, you mentioned the creativity of teachers. Will the panel each share the most innovative practices used by their teachers and staff members to reach kids and families they have seen the last 9 years? And we will start with Pedro and go around the circle.
Weeks. 9
weeks. 9 weeks. Sorry, no, I'm reading that wrong. 9 weeks.
Let's pray. Let's all pray that
it's not 9 years.
For 9 years.
So, and I apologize for noise in the background because I have a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old. So you'll hear them screaming as they're fighting their mom to go to bed. But just the realities of working from home, right?
Yeah.
So the, one of the things that I've seen, so one of the interesting theories that I want to test is we're looking at right now lessons where we have the highest student engagement across different classrooms. And these are all Google Classrooms, electronic classrooms. And one of the things that I'm really interested to see, and I really want to have our principals have conversations with their teams, is where do we see the strongest engagement, and how connected is that to where teachers had strong relationships before the spring break? And I really believe that's something that's very valuable for us to learn, because one of the things that I love about our teachers, they have a lot of passion, they care a lot about our kids. And our goal is to really create a great way to train them and to just expand their academic capacity. But the piece that we can't really, that's a lot harder to train is relationship building. And so that's one of the areas. And so what I've seen is just some really fascinating videos that teachers have created. We had a student that did a video saluting his kindergarten and preschool teacher. I think it was his preschool teacher. And so I've seen this great interaction that we have that we have recordings for, and some of them have went viral on YouTube. But it's just been fascinating for me just to watch that kind of creativity, both from teachers and, like I said, even a student. I think it was a preschooler at Sarah King who saluted his teacher.
That's a great story.
It's adorable. And Rebecca, who asked the question, is an SAISD preschool teacher who I interviewed her for a story, and she was saying that a lot of the work of making contact with the students and keeping them engaged was done back in the fall. Making that point that Pedro just made, that when the families know that they can talk to their teacher about where they need support, they're more likely to answer the phone when the teacher calls in a time when they're feeling frantic. If you are a source of stress for them, or that they're not connected with you, then you drop on the priority list. But if they know that you're someone who's a constant source of comfort and support and encouragement, then they want to hear from you and they want to engage with you. And that was an interesting facet of the mechanics of keeping connected to students, as opposed to like asynchronous, synchronous, how often do you Zoom, what time do you Zoom, that kind of thing.
Dr. Anderson, when it comes to innovation and connecting teachers to university students, right, it's a little different sometimes. They don't have parents necessarily. Sometimes you do, but what are some of the innovative ways you've been able to connect to college students that are now scattered probably from university all over the nation?
They are not only all over the nation, but all over the world. There was a Vietnam with a 12-hour time difference. So if the class was meeting and she really wanted to be present at the same time, she had to think about the clock and what time she was going to get up. I look at that question and I have two different responses. One of them is I talked with, in particular, department chairs and faculty members in disciplines where everything is about doing something hands-on, whether it's working in a science lab or performing drama, being on a stage, working in an art studio, taking a private music lesson. And in every one of those cases, it fascinated me to listen to the ways that all of the teachers had wonderful opportunities to improvise, to give students, not try and recreate through the internet something that they would have done in person, but to think about what was the learning outcome they were trying to achieve, and then how do they still achieve that outcome even using technology. There are things that are interesting in terms of imagining what a one-on-one music lesson is like over the internet, but that is a little bit easier to think about and understand. One of the things that fascinated me was listening to the way that groups did performances using Zoom and thinking about things. And it even got to the point that we issued a challenge for a Zoom one-act playwriting contest to come up with a play that would be native to Zoom to be performed in it. So there were a lot of great fun things that emerged from that. But the other answer that I ended up thinking about is every faculty member who made it to the end of the semester is a real hero. None of us expected to go to remote learning. And the fact that they instantly rewrote syllabi, they were a key lifeline for these students in terms of their sense of what normal is. There is no young adult who is 18, 19, 20 years old, finally on their own, who's going to be excited about going back home and living with their parents. And those faculty members, I think, really picked up on some of the challenges that the students were having. So not only were the faculty members homeschooling their own children and possibly taking care of ill relatives, but they were both support and community and instructors for our students. And so when I listen to them talk, I'm just in awe at the kind of energy they invested in seeing their students as whole human beings, and hearing the way that they would start out every class period spending time checking in on how are you doing. you are living in a time of incredible uncertainty, and you're old enough to understand some of the implications of this, and you are suddenly back home and nothing is going the way you expected. How are you doing as a young adult coming to terms with this and making your way? So, there were very creative, unique projects. One marketing professor, Mario Gonzalez, taught a class about marketing, and he turned it into digital storytelling and had students all end up producing a short piece of digital storytelling for their final project about the nature of the experience in COVID-19. But it's just like all of these ways that they worked, and yet they all made it through and brought a community of students through it successfully. So I would say the entire unexpected experiment was deep immersion in pure creativity.
That's good. And Emily, where have you seen this? Where have you seen innovation happening, maybe outside SAISD and Trinity University? Where have you seen it and across our city when you've been reporting on this?
I think I've been most impressed with the education systems that have identified solutions for the problems that they're super realistic about. So, it's great. And I think it's wonderful to see the lessons of, teachers filming themselves doing really creative things. But what I was really impressed by was the school district that started using their buses to go give Wi-Fi signals out to their students. So they identified that maybe the internet signal wasn't strong enough in apartment complexes or homes or wherever it was. And so they would park their buses and tell kids to come out and do their homework connecting to the Wi-Fi. And that's not anything I think many people would have thought of prior to all of this. And then one that I'm a SAP for graduations anyway, but seeing all of the high schools and universities really adapt in that circumstance. Texas A&M San Antonio just last Friday did a drive-up graduation. So all of the graduates came in their robes, and sometimes they had like moms and dads or brothers and sisters, whoever it was, and they got out in their full regalia, took a photo 6 feet apart from the university president and from the college mascot, and got to celebrate. And it was just, I think, a really lovely way to still recognize everyone's contribution and recognize that we're in a time where it doesn't feel like it's a very celebrated end of the year, but they still wanted to give that. So that's kind of been the most interesting and creative approaches, have been the ones that really recognize the issues that are going on and seek to still find that solution.
Oh, thank you for that. Things are happening all over the city in ways of innovation, and not even just, education. All of our churches have gone online, and we're trying new ways to stay connected, just like here at Pub Theology. I do have a question for Dr. Anderson after this, but I do want to remind people, if you have a question, you can post your questions on our Facebook comments or our YouTube comments, and we'll see those questions. If you have any questions for a particular panelist or the panel as a whole, and we'll try to put those questions online. We have a few popping up now, so we'll get to those here in a few minutes. But Dr. Anderson, I do want to talk a little bit about universities right now. The state of California's system, Cal, UCLA, decided to go online in the fall. How are we connecting all these universities? Obviously, you're speaking to other university presidents, other chancellors to make these decisions. How are we determining which campuses are best to probably go online and which ones are going to stay in person?
So I just last night spent 2 hours on a conference call with 16 university presidents. So you're right. We all spent a lot of time talking with each other and comparing notes. You refer to California, and it was one of the California state systems that had made the decision that they were going to do almost everything online. I think that decision is going to vary a lot by type of institution, size of institution, and maybe even by geography. Last night, I was speaking with small residential liberal arts colleges across the southern United States. And we all provide a kind of educational experience that really is invested in the physical presence of living in community with each other. So we're all exploring what are the things that have to be true so that our students are safe, so that our faculty are safe, our staff. Which means that we're all looking at different kinds of things that we can adjust on our campuses to ensure appropriate social distancing. We're asking questions about what would be the ideal school calendar that would help us ensure that during the times of the year when there may be a greater probability of a resurgence of COVID-19 alongside seasonal flu, that perhaps it would disrupt us less. And so I don't have any specific details to announce. We have faculty groups that are working right now at Trinity on making their decisions. At some universities, they may be a little bit ahead of us. One of the models that last night I heard some universities are using is that some may start on time and add a little bit more time in class so that they could be done with all of the campus work by Thanksgiving, and then have a longer winter break so that that period when the flu tends to circulate, it wouldn't be disrupting the campus as much. Today, it was interesting. I see someone that noted it here in the chat that UT announced that they would start the school year as scheduled. And I think being here in Texas, there is a real desire in our area for everybody to be back to a more normal situation. We hear it from the students who have been admitted to come to Trinity that they missed the end of their senior year. They missed being with their friends. They cannot wait to be at college, but they mean physically being at college. They're not interested in the idea of spending more time at home, taking courses remotely. So the decisions, everybody last night really talked a lot about what do we have to do to ensure safety? What do we have to do to think about faculty and staff members who may have some health issues, being a risk group, and they may need to be able to have some ways to use technology so that they're not in as much risk teaching their courses. So I think we're going to see a lot of creative solutions that will emerge. You'll see a lot of probably HR departments coming up with new policies to try and accommodate different ways for people to do their jobs. But everyone I talk to, there's a real desire for that return to life and community.
Well, thank you for that. We do have a question here from Lauren, and I think it's a good question. We'll show it on the screen. It says, considering students may need to be on rotating or split shift campus schedules while their caregivers and have work constraints, what can workforce partners and community partners do to create an ecosystem of support where children have safe and enriching environments?
Such a Lauren question.
Good job, Lauren. We'll send that up to Patti or Pedro.
Yes, I think that it would be important for us to take a look at things with our partners and see how the education environment can be strengthened by us working together, whether, taking some of the relationships we've had with community partners, working with our children after school, some of them during the school time. How can it be enhanced so that it is something that strengthens the experience if it has to be a lot of the virtual use of lessons? And can some of those partners come on campus and help with tutoring? Can our students go to a place in the community other than the school if there's an opportunity for a shared learning space that where perhaps their home environment doesn't lend for them being able to learn virtually in a quiet, spacious place? Are the ways that some of our community partners could expand what they have to offer in order so that to be more possible for our students? And then also just some of the activities, say, that the children have been doing during this time at home. Are there other activities that would be maybe of the expertise of a partner that they could help in the creation of those activities, or supplying equipment or tools or paint or whatever it takes for activities for the children to complete? And I think, again, any very direct educational partners that we have, to see how we can join together with them and helping us deal with the issue of a split learning environment. so that we're sure that it's strong enough that the children are getting the individualized attention that they need.
I'm along those lines, the split needs. I want to kind of circle back to the other things that school provides, especially pre-K through 12 public school. Um, as we come back and we have some flexibility, I'd love to hear Patti and Pedro's perspective on prioritizing not just the academic recovery from this, but there's a stabilizing role that the school plays. And I think that there's great concern in the community about kids who, yes, there's a health risk if we come to school, there's a health risk if we stay home. And I am curious how those conversations happen when you start to consider what services to offer for how long and for who, and how we decide to balance the public health aspect of this and the individual health of students who are in precarious situations.
Yeah, and so for us, this is the challenge, because we have to balance the safety of staff and students along with academic needs and social and emotional needs. And I'll tell you what I struggle with. Me myself, I just think back of when I grew up. We were living in a 2-bedroom apartment. At the height of the size of our family, it was 10 of us, 10 siblings, 10 children, and plus my 2 parents, 1 bathroom. I would not have been able to survive in this virtual learning world. There's just no way. Not only didn't I have a computer, not only didn't I have internet, it just my living conditions would not have allowed it. And I wouldn't have allowed it for my siblings. And so when I think about, how the role that we play as a school district, one of the things, just building on what Ms. Radle said, I see our buildings being an equalizer in the community, especially in these times when we know that we have such inequities with housing. And so what I really would love to, really envision is how do we use our facilities in a way, and the way I'm thinking about them is, so they stay open later, that we work with our students. And I see, Bekah, to answer your question more directly, when we're going to start summer programs July 20th, I really want to use those summer programs to bring in children to just check, really just see how they're doing. Having our teachers spend time to connecting with them, because I worry about connections we're losing in this virtual world. Really having parents and staff feeling safe about the things we're putting in place in terms of procedures before our first day of school, August 10th. But I do see our facilities being, I want them to be a place of safety, a place where children can receive services from counseling to nutrition, and including, even if we need to, even partnering with our medical partners for families who just need help. And so I see our buildings playing a bigger role than ever.
Emily, I'd love to hear your perspective as well. Again, on what you're hearing from other districts, but also when you look ahead at the summer and the stories that you're following. An editor said to me recently, like, the adult needs and the student needs in this equation are really tough to balance. And like, the stories that we tell, who are we telling? Are we talking about, the students who need their adults to be present and the adults who are frayed to the last, like they're hanging on by a thread, it feels like, or the public health concern and bringing in maybe teachers who are older, who live with someone older, versus the very real need of those students. Tell me about that tension. How are you balancing that from a reporting standpoint?
I think it's really hard. It's just like what all of the education leaders are going through. They are probably thinking, well, parents, school serves childcare to a degree. And so parents need their children to be somewhere so that way they can return to work and continue making a living. Children need some kind of a development. And depending on their health status, it might be beneficial or not beneficial for them to return to school or campus. And then there's teachers and the rest of the workforce too. And I think it's a really complicated, graded issue. And I think it's a disservice to not consider all of those viewpoints when you're talking about that. So for writing a story from my perspective, I don't think it's fair to just say, well, students need to return, or parents need kids to return, or teachers of a certain age or of certain health statuses can't return at this point. I think we need to consider all of those things because it's going to have a different impact on everybody. And I don't know that there's a perfect right answer. And I would imagine that anybody making those decisions is probably feeling that same idea. So I know that's something that I'm very curious to see how that ends up turning out. And I think, too, we're not even going to know that it's the right answer when it's going forward. It'll probably be a lot of different ripple effects after, schools do reopen in whatever capacity they reopen in.
Yeah, it's not like you can lab test this.
Yeah.
You can't be like, all right, we're going to use your school district as the lab to see if there's a huge outbreak and what we should do. We kind of get it's one shot at a time. Let's get another question from the
Dave Garza asked, will we be seeing class sizes of less than 22 in SAISD in order to maintain safe social distancing?
And I'd like to put an asterisk on that and add, how do you do social distancing with any preschooler?
All right. Oh, second.
It looks like they disappeared again.
Okay, so it's a great question. And so first of all, I think part of it for us is what we're thinking of is what's going to be our guiding values and guiding principles. And one of the things that we're talking about is we really believe that children should be in our schools. They should be in our classrooms to the most extent possible, because we have such inequities in living conditions. And so using that guiding principle, what we're doing right now is analyzing every one of our classrooms and school buildings and looking at how many children can we have at any point in time and achieve a 6-foot social distancing. And so right now we're doing that analysis. We're actually looking at different scenarios district-wide about, do we do AM and PM shifts? Do we do every other day shifts? We're actually going to reach out to parents and staff and just really talk to them and get their input on that. But one of the things that I see in our district is we could have, because our schools are so different in terms of the amount of children we have enrolled in capacity. So I'll give you an example. I have Poe Middle School, who right now has 7th and 8th grade, had really strong gains going into the spring break. And, we could fit every child that's in 7th and 8th grade at Poe and bring them in. Now, we don't have to have them in the same classroom. We can actually divide the children so that they can be using in multiple classrooms, multiple learning spaces, some on devices and some in direct instruction. And so that would allow us to have, much less than the normal class size in that direct instruction. And then we can have children, switch back and forth. I have other schools like Bonham, which is full. I mean, they're already almost at 100% enrollment for what we're projecting next year, and they're just full. It's just they don't have space in that building. And so, of course, looking at Bonham and saying, okay, so do we look at how many children can we have at a time? And again, do we use an AM PM? Do we use an every other day schedule? Are there certain children, like our younger children, that we should try to bring in more frequently? So those are the questions that we're asking ourselves right now. And like I said, I want to make these decisions with our parents because, as Ms. Radle said earlier, we want to partner with community partners, with our chambers. I like to find solutions, because whatever solution we find, there's going to be unintended consequences. And one of them is going to be childcare. Because right now, what I am seeing is that social distancing requirements will not allow us to have large classrooms, whether it's 22 pre-K to 4 or 28 5th grade and up. It's not going to allow it. And so those are the conversations we're having now, so that we can again be ready to have ask really our parents and staff and really work with them on how to solve this.
Bekah, can I ask a follow-up question real quick?
Of course.
I'm just curious, Superintendent Martinez, how that also works with staffing models, because funding is even more in flux right now, especially, with depending on enrollment. But how do you game plan that out and figure out how many teachers you'll need? Because if you have smaller amounts of students in one space, you'll need more staff to cover that all.
Yeah, it's a great question, Emily. So if we did, so in an ideal situation, let's just say that we could have half the kids learning from home. Ideally, it's the same staffing model, right? Because we have some children they're coming in shifts basically, and there's smaller class sizes while the other children are learning at home. Or we even want to pilot the idea of children even live streaming into the classroom. So the teachers have a small set of children, like what Danny said is one of his examples. You have children in the classroom while others are live streaming in. So again, we'd want to pilot that because that's a lot of work for our teachers. So we'd want to make sure we train them and we work with them how to perfect that. So that'd be one scenario. The scenario that I talked about earlier about bringing in all the students and dividing them across the building, we'd have to literally use every adult in the building. We'd have to use, so if the children are using our digital platform, we don't necessarily have to have a teacher with them. We need somebody there though to watch them and to make sure that they deal with technical issues that they may have, and of course just having an adult to make sure that children are safe. And so again, these are models that we're gonna, I should say, these are we're doing the analysis now, building by building, classroom by classroom, and we're trying to anticipate, by the way, what TA is going to require. Because if you look at the summer school guidelines that TA just released this week, they're not allowing more than 10 students per classroom. And so it's interesting for me as I see the summer school guidelines, and it makes me think that this is a preview for what may happen in the fall.
If I go on to some of that.
Oh, sorry, we were muted. Dr. Anderson, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, when you look at college, we're thinking about exactly the same issues, doing studies of the space, thinking about the number of individuals in a classroom. But there was a comment made earlier, I think it was Bekah, who said, can you even do social distance with preschoolers or with first graders? And I think you might have the same question when you think about college students too. Yes. And, they're young adults. And, how much do we have the ability to truly control behavior and contact among others? We do our best to give guidelines, to set up the right physical conditions. But one of the things working with college that is very interesting to think about is last night, there was a lot of discussion about how will you have new conversations about community behavioral norms? How do you get every employee, every faculty member, every staff member, every student to realize the ways that we move and interact will have an impact on each other, and that we're going to see probably the emergence of a more explicit conversation about what is the social contract we have of what we owe to each other to help each other stay safe and healthy.
I've been thinking a lot about that social contract question. Now that you've brought it up, all the other questions I had are kind of getting shuffled in my brain, but about balancing how we care for each other with our need to socialize. And I think that's just been a question for a lot of people. And I don't mean just the selfishness of I want to go to the beach and whatnot, but the very real as you watch your own mental health suffer from. I don't think I've had this will be my first teleconference situation, work situation, anything like that, to not have a 3-year-old like hanging on me and whining and needing something. And that's far from the most stressful thing that's one of the least stressful things people are going through right now. And so that balance of caring for yourself and caring for others is really getting tricky. And that's something I would love to hear Patti's wisdom on. And then I also am curious about one of the reasons pre-K has gotten such momentum in recent years is because we talk about the gaps that are created in unequal home settings. And SAISD is probably confronting a little bit less of this than other districts because the poverty is so near universal in the district. And the ultra high resources, there's not a huge swath of the district that is just rocketing ahead with private tutoring and parents who are sitting at home with them who don't have to work and can sit at home with them and walk them through every single lesson to make sure they're absorbing every drop of learning. But on a citywide scale, on a national scale, when you're talking about the students who are applying to college, these gaps, the longer this goes on, the longer you can't tell parents, okay, when the kids are at home, no learning. You can only learn when you're in school so that we all learn together. There's going to be these gaps that are kind of created, and parents approach that differently based on the resources or based on just wanting to like fill their kids' time with something to do. And so I'm wondering, what does this mean? All of this time at home and these different parent resources put into um, the kids' time, how they spend their time. What does this mean for the future of college applications and who gets into elite colleges and whatnot? That's a question that's been weighing on me.
Yeah, let's get to that mental health question first, and then we'll jump into that second question. So, Patti, can you share a little bit about, and I do want to talk to Dr. Instant about mental health as well. So, Patti, can you share a little bit about that first part of that question?
Okay, thank you. Well, I think we certainly need to find, simple venues to support each other, whether it's our next door neighbor or it's another teacher that you used to teach with, if it's another parent you went to church with, another person that you met through a recreation center. It strikes me, like with my own church setting, like people that I have seen for years and I've known their first name, but didn't really have their phone number. I see them every Sunday, or don't really know their last name. And now how valuable that information would be to me, because I don't want to lose contact. I don't want to lose that sense of community. And I think people being aware of how important that is in these circumstances, perhaps, could, pay attention to the people that they were around, and try to find ways to maintain that relationship. It's been interesting to see people who didn't know much about an iPad before, but families who now know what Zoom is and are connecting with people and can support each other that way. Of course, that's compared to the number of parents who don't have time for getting on an iPad or don't have an iPad easily accessible to them. That's not realistic. But I think those ways of calling each other, sharing the stories of the day. I have somebody that texts me every day with the smallest of message, but it helps. It reminds you that you are connected. And I think, we need to do more, I think, in helping parents realize the value of the time at home with their children. When we talk about, how do you fill this time with children, and teaching lessons about being organized about your day, and, maybe helping them know how to connect through a phone call with a friend. I'm thinking of the very little ones, that could maybe do, a parent could learn to help them do a FaceTime or something. But I think also just going to your closest resources, your brothers, your sisters, your cousins, your sister-in-law, and making sure that those relationships remain strong or become strong, and that we continue to emphasize with those inside our household how important it is to reach out. Just not having a device in your hand constantly, but do something personal. And it's been really fun to see the things like the car parades, because I've seen teachers and parents and children sort of bonding together over these fun community activities, because it's about one of the only things that you can do with a group where you're not going against all the social distancing laws. But again, I've seen creativity kicking in households and in neighborhoods, figuring out how to make those contacts. And I think being creative in some way about that is important, and there are lots of ideas on the internet as well. But I think it's a very important issue that you raise, Rebecca, that that's part of the health. It's education, but it's keeping ourselves healthy emotionally, socially, while we're going through this.
And I'm curious about the role, like how you guys are preparing school counselors to address that when everybody comes back, both at the college level and on school campuses. Those guys were in fairly short supply, relatively short supply, and their job is about to get really big. How are you guys preparing them?
So for us, it's our school counselors, it's our social workers. It's, we've been implementing social and emotional learning standards in these last 2 years, and it's our most popular professional development for teachers. And so one of the things that we're doing now is looking at how we provide that training, because I really do, in the beginning of the school year, as I said earlier, in using our summer programs, I think we have to spend that initial time on just making connections with students and really checking in with them. And so for us, that's something right now that we're planning. And so we're going to do various professional development, but also, just really working together across our different professionals on how we do that. And also joining we have communities in schools, which we're very lucky to have, in our district. So we want to partner with communities in schools and other partners we have, so that they also can help us as we support our students.
And Bekah, I think it's particularly important as well as we approach the summer time to help our children, help ourselves get connected. My husband Rod and I run a community center, and we usually have a summer program. We saw that the City Parks and Recreation announced that they are not having any summer programs for kids. And so that's a big void for a lot of children. And then what the individual community centers like ourselves are being asked to do, make it very difficult to make it a fun situation. You can't have the children doing things where they're sharing things. Like, so if you're playing checkers, you're both touching the checkers, they're going to say, well, that's not the kind of thing you can do. You have to figure out other things that the children can do. You can't put a box of, and this is a challenge for the teachers as we go back on campus too. You can't put a container of scissors on the table and say, we're going to do this project. All the students now have to make sure that they have their own, all their supplies that are not shared. And I think there's so many details in all this that, again, affect us emotionally and socially in the smallest of ways. You don't share a pencil anymore. You don't loan a pencil. Who's going to take care of that? Different ways of handling that. The details, some of these details like that, I think, raise the level of stress and anxiety that, because it doesn't look like a big thing, but it's one little thing after the other. And again, for that, I say what the issue of the social and emotional stability is very important.
When I think about this topic at the university level.
Sure. Yeah. That's my question for you is, when I think of that, and the question I kind of want to direct that, and you can continue saying that, but You got a whole student life staff at Trinity. You have RAs, you have student life coordinators. Betty Curry was watching, and she does great student life work. How is this connected? How are you preparing and caring for the healthcare and mental health of the university students?
Yeah. So we talk about this a lot, and if you talk with probably any university president on his or her campus, they would discuss the challenge in that right now in the United States, if you look at mental health issues, even before the COVID-19 crisis, there are many people who are saying that concerns about good mental health have reached a level of being a population concern in the US. Many large employers were already establishing mental health offices in the workplace because they believed that was a great investment for improving employee engagement, productivity, keeping things going. COVID-19 happens, and I'd say it just really raises all the stress levels immensely. As I was listening to Patti describe all of the new details that people think about, those are stressors that people are worrying about and frustrated. So it's going to have some very dramatic impacts. But to be very specific, one of the things that happened when students went from being on campus to in remote, they lost things. And the language that we've come to realize is that we are all experiencing different kinds of grief over things that we've lost. And it's very important to recognize, name, and understand the things that didn't happen and may never happen because of the way time moves and you move beyond those moments. And at the same time, we're also learning you can never take anything for granted. So to learn to be able to counterbalance that moment of grief, also with recognition of the things that we have to be grateful for, the things that keep happening, even in the midst of a horrible global pandemic, that can inspire gratitude and awe as we think about the power of human connections and that drive to be connected with each other. So as we look at all of that in the university, we have a counseling service office. We have added staff in the past. We're debating and discussing what can we do to add perhaps additional staff for the fall. We have one person who, as I listened to Pedro describe the K through 12 situation, we hired a case manager to help be a kind of liaison between the counseling services and student academic support services to help fill that gap about all the things that need to be traced and supported in the student experience to help individuals be successful. Our students, so this is a thing that I end up thinking about a lot, what will be different at the start of the fall semester in 2020? We will be welcoming the graduating high school class of 2020 that missed out on so many of the experiences that they expected. How will they be looking to us to fill a gap and help them perhaps bring closure to that grieving so that they could move on in a healthier way? And for individuals who have beyond grief, different kinds of emotional support that they need, how will we be prepared to use community to support them? And so, faculty members at universities are very aware that they are not trained counselors. They're very connected to students. They see their worlds. Students confide in them. And yet, for faculty to do their job, they need to have the resources to refer the students to someone else who truly is equipped and trained to help them. So the kind of thing you're talking about is one where we look at what kind of resources are available. I think the challenge is how can we scale things? Right now, the model is to typically think about many of the mental health services being delivered one-on-one. If we're dealing with a truly population level challenge, we are all going to have to find ways to work and train people better, perhaps do different kinds of collective cognitive behavioral therapy training to help people learn, very learnable techniques about ways to manage stress and anxiety. But it is a factor of our life that we were already seeing this dramatic increase before COVID-19. And now it's clear it's not going to go away and it's going to be even more exacerbated. So strategies that look beyond individuals and think, how do we collectively learn to become stronger in terms of social, emotional well-being are going to be very important.
No, that's That's really good. That's exactly what I wanted to hear, because when you think of that class of 2020, not only did they have a rough ending to their high school careers, they're going to have a very unusual beginning to maybe their collegiate careers or any of the other things that they were hoping to do, getting a job around town, or all the things that could be possible. They're going to be grieving, even if they're not going to a university-like setting, or if they're going to a gap year program that's not existing.
Just losing all your
So,
dispersing that.
yeah,
future.
I'd like to share one more detail. We have a group at the University of faculty members who teach a Latinx leadership class. It's a kind of networking class. The group meets on Friday afternoons, and as their final project this semester, they each recorded a short 3 to 4 minute video directed to me as the president, giving ideas, creative suggestions about things that we might be able to do. And a dominant theme throughout all of them was their concern about the new group of students who would be arriving. And they had different ideas about ways to connect with them, embrace them, make them feel welcome. There was one person who even suggested we ought to host a senior prom because they didn't get to have one. And so the first thing they would do at college would be celebrate the senior prom they didn't get to have. But I learned that this group of students went ahead and they got the names and addresses of all of the students who are coming, and they're going out of their way to write personal handwritten notes, welcoming them into the community and telling, we just can't wait till you're here so that we'll have a chance to get to know you.
Dr. Anderson, you should be a preacher. You basically, that could be a sermon. That's exactly makes my heart sing. The creating the common good, finding the creativity to welcome people in better ways. And I think this is really interesting. I think the way we think about mental health and connectivity and community, we're going to grow from this, right? We're going to learn something out of this COVID experience and probably not let it go. Even when the COVID crisis passes, we're going to hang on to some of these things that really worked well. And that to me, that's exciting and fun ways to do community. So Emily Donaldson does have a question, and I do want to get to her.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I mean, a lot of you touched on things that will be different. So President Anderson, you mentioned like there won't be proms. Board President Radle, I think you mentioned like you can't touch the same checkers, things like that. I'm wondering how you still create experiences that still feel like those quintessential, school community building experiences, like extracurricular activities for pre-K-12, sports, businesses, things like that. But then for universities, I think about residence halls at Trinity. Also all of those same like summer welcome orientation type events that were in person. How do you still have those? And then I'm wondering, if you don't have those, does that impact, you think, your ability to bring students back when things start slowly reopening?
Yeah, sometimes I think we don't step back far enough from the situation we're in to get a better view, to see where the openings are to do something more. And while there may be grieving, I mean, there is grieving, because the graduation wasn't what people expected it to be. But there are also tremendous celebrations. You see the video of the student who created her own stage on her front yard and got her regalia on and had her own ceremony on her front yard, and neighbors gathered around 6 feet apart. Well, that's something very different and something very, very memorable. And that's her piece of 2020. That's her piece of her high school life that she'll be talking about, forever. How many of us, after going through a graduation ceremony, really talk about the ceremony itself forever? That will be one talked about forever. So again, I think it's this issue of not letting the virus get in the way of our creativity, not assuming that everything is stolen from us. And what can we do to bring ourselves to another level of creativity, to make things memorable for us, to see our future in a different way? How do we step back from all of this and say, hey, you know what? Yeah, that's what everybody's done for years, or that's the way it's been for years. But, what could we do? Could we have a special prom a year after this is all over, could we join next year's prom? Just different ideas. I think it could be a stimulus to seeing different ways of doing things that might inspire us for the future as well.
Yeah, and I'm
Go ahead.
no, I mean, I was just gonna say, I mean, I'm gonna be the optimist. One of the things that we're doing in our district at SAISD is any plans that we're putting in place. One of the guiding principles for us is that at some point, and it could be as early as the second semester, there's going to be either whether there's a vaccine or some breakthrough that's going to allow us to go back to where we were before spring break. And of course, as we said earlier, we want to make that not be the normal, but we want to make it better than that. So I do feel that one of the things we have to consider is that we are going to get through this, and we definitely want to work with our graduating seniors and our students that are living through this today. But I also, I don't want us to forget the fact that I do believe in just humanity and in all the things that are happening around the world, and that I do feel that whether it's athletic activities, fine art activities, I do think that there's going to be some changes that will stay with us, but there's going to be a lot of things that I think we'll be able to redo once these medical breakthroughs happen. And I'm an optimist. I think it's going to happen, sometime before the second semester ends.
I would agree with the things that Patti and Pedro both said. I love the way that Patti talked about stepping back and seeing the creativity. And I completely agree with Pedro's optimism. This is a moment, this is a passage we're going through, and things will be different at the end. And when I think about, so how are we designing or redesigning things that are going to happen? We don't have all the answers yet. We're working on many of the very specific things, but just to give you one example, in the past, new student orientation would have pulled the entire new student body together in a large group. It's very clear that we're going to need to be rethinking about how do you divide them up into smaller groups. And is a smaller group a bad thing? It may help people really connect and form a peer group that's going to create a sense of belonging in a very different way than if we had done it the way we had been doing it. And so I think we're going to be able to use this as a kind of experiment to test and learn some things. And every time we're going to be looking at what was the true outcome we were trying to achieve by doing things the old way. And we've got a great opportunity here. No one is going to say, we've always done it that way. You've got total freedom to try and redesign it. One of the things for me early on as we went into this was trying to think, how do I connect with all the Trinity community? And it felt strange to me at first, but I found a tripod, and I would go out and make short videos of myself sharing a message, and I learned to post them on the internet. And about the second one that I did was where I referred to the concept of design thinking. And design thinking helps you imagine 2 or 3 possible good versions of the outcome, not one single way that it has to be. And then it helps you think about 2 or 3 different ways that you can try to get to those positive outcomes. There's a real bias toward action, toward doing. If it doesn't work, you quit and you try again, because it's not a single pathway. And I think right now that creativity that Patti was mentioning is the kind of thing that if we can instill a greater breadth of design thinking in our society, and to not feel despair or giving up on things, but have real excitement about the opportunities to really be looking for new ways to address things that we may have constrained in the past. And some of those constraints are gone because we don't have to do it the way we always did it.
And a point of humor is that we keep talking about prom and all this stuff, like, oh my gosh, they're missing the best moment of your, like, was prom the best moment of any of y'all? Be honest. Like, and I'm thinking about freshman orientation. I hated freshman orientation. I'm an introvert. I was miserable I cried through the whole way through it. And I thought, when you mentioned smaller groups, I was like, oh, what I would have given for 10 people instead of, 10,000 or whatever. And so I think that there's also something to be said for some of these rites of passage. I don't want to say they don't know what they're missing, because they've seen siblings and whatnot going through it, but doing it their way might end up being a happier memory than for some of them, what it might have been, especially when it comes to big crowds and highly extroverted activities, which there was a lot of jokes at the beginning of lockdown, which was like, introverts are fine. We've been doing this for a long time. But I think a lot of our expectations about what is fun, what is community, what is being social, are changing, and I do think it's a chance for us to look to other students, other young people for leadership on how to make the most of this. I mean, some of these kids are killing it. They are making the most of it, and they're kind of offering guidance to us about how to recapture the joy and the creativity and the possibility, because they haven't ever done it any other way. They don't have a prom to look back on and try to relive through their children and whatnot. And I think it was This American Life did a prom episode lately, and they were just like, "We're so sorry for you guys, but really, like, you'll have so much to you'll have so many fewer disappointments than the people who really did get to go to prom and be disappointed." Anyway, that's just kind of a humorous note before we transition to more audience questions.
No, Emily, you got to answer that question. Do you have any responses to your own question? Do you have any more thoughts to your own question?
I think what I wonder about is just, like you said, Bekah, there's a lot of people that it's not going to be any big deal to miss. But I do wonder, probably more for the universities, if there are students that say, I'm just going to stay at a school closer to my own instead of leaving my home to, have not the full experience what I've been expecting. And I don't know that it will be a huge impact on that, but I'm certainly curious to see if that does have any kind of effect.
I think if you look at some of the surveys that have come out, it's very clear that many students are thinking about staying closer to home. And most universities right now, it's the time of year when they are counting the deposits for students who say, I'm coming next year, or they're looking at students who are going to be returning. Did they enroll in classes? Do we know what to expect next year? And at Trinity, we're very excited because we had a really great success recruiting students, and it looks like our students are coming back. But it's a context where if the public health situation changes significantly in the summer or some new finding comes out, I think everyone is taking things a little bit a day at a time, and they worry. And so that I have heard of students who previously were expecting to leave Texas to go to school have decided they're going to stay in the state. They want to be closer to home. So I think that the way I would reframe the question is, what are going to be some of the more lasting changes in our social behavior that may occur, and how long will it take for those to shift to something different if it is simply a response to the immediate crisis?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we should get some.
All right, we'll go to the next question. Michael Logan has a question. We'll pull it up here right now. Once decisions are made, it will take time to implement plans and I'm trying to read this right. Operationalize new processes as well as get families prepared. With that in mind, are there cutoff dates or decision phases outlined in everyone's scenario planning? So all the planning, when do you make a decision? When do you have to cut it off? How's your team planning for that?
Oh. Yeah, Pedro, I'd like to hear you talk about what you're doing with the summer school in order to address some of that. Even so, though, things still keep changing, but I'm proud of what you've set in place, if you could share that. I think, is he muted?
Yep, okay, there we go. So that's a great question, Michael. And so one of the things that we want to do, that's why, the next week, really this week and next week and the first couple of weeks in June, we really want to spend time actually talking to our staff as well as our parents, because we have a lot of detailed plans that we're looking at, or detailed scenarios. And we don't want to make those decisions by ourselves. We really want to make them together with our families and with our staff. To answer your question, our goal would be to make some decisions by the end of June. By then, I also feel we'll have more guidance from our state. And then we want to use our summer programs to implement, programs in a small scale, or those processes in a small scale. And imagine, us bringing in, children, especially the younger children at different grade levels, and bringing them in small groups and really working with our parents and our staff, showing, okay, let's really perfect not perfect, but let's really work on the processes to keep them safe. And I do think there's some unanswered questions. I mean, Bekah earlier asked about how do you keep 3 and 4-year-olds from not wanting to hug each other and not wanting to be together. That's going to be almost impossible. But I do believe, one of the things that our preschool teachers and kindergarten teachers do very well is they have stations. When I asked my 6-year-old who's a kindergartner, what do you miss the most about, school? She's like, the stations. She loved going from one station to another. So I think, it's going to require our teachers to be more creative as we work with our children. But I do believe, we're gonna spend a lot of time with parents around just all the safety guidelines, temperature checks, and and one of the questions that we're gonna ask our parents, and I'm just gonna say this, is we're gonna ask our parents and staff, should we be considering right now additional days in our calendar next year in case we have an outbreak, whether it's at the school level or at the district level, in case we have to shut down a school or a set of schools for the time being. And so that's something that I want to ask our parents because and our staff, because I mean maybe it's something we need to plan for now in next year's calendar.
So I can answer that question for Trinity. Michael Logan is one of the staff members in Residential Life.
There it is.
For his instructions to know how to make things happen. He is a great person. He was one of the team players that on March 11, we announced that we were going to empty our residence halls that next Monday. That was a Wednesday. He was part of the group that over a period of 5 days helped almost 2,000 students check out of residence halls, pack up their things. Just a phenomenal team. But he has to think about what is it going to take to have everything ready, and what do families need to know in terms of being ready. Right now at Trinity, we've got a lot of work groups that are digging into all of the very specific questions that I know he would love to know the answers to. I think we will have answers internally probably by mid-June. And it'll be a question, like Pedro said, of figuring out, do we have enough public health information from our state and from our county that we can confidently release that information to the public. But that I think we're all working with that idea that we've got to plan now for the best scenarios we can predict, and that as we move closer to the day, sometime in June, we'll get to the point where we have enough information that we can make some very clear plans and announcements.
No, you really do have a good team at Trinity, and a lot of them have been watching. Rachel, Boaz to Tara and Timpton, all these people do a great job caring for students and planning for these things. And Michael's one of them as well. So, go ahead.
I want to circle back real quick. We had a 2-part question that I should have separated. But when we think about the ripple effect of, okay, so we got the summer slide. Now they're calling it the COVID slide. It is 6 months of some kids having all of the resources of home, and parents, sitting with them on their Zoom calls, learning how to teach them math and doing it because they don't have to work and they can spend the time doing that. Or, and then some kids having to only go to 1 out of every 10 Zoom calls. And, it's not news to anybody on this call. There's been some learning losses. As this goes on, when you're talking about reducing essentially days of high quality teacher instruction, we've been talking, I'm just thinking about all the things we've been talking about and reporting on as far as what makes a difference. Oh, it's, the teacher. Well, now the time with the teacher is cut, and all of that. And I know that it's an emergency situation that we cannot, well, you can only do what you can do. But then what do we do going forward? What are y'all lobbying for? What are you pushing for as far as with the state and accountability and college admissions? What do we need to start taking into account as far as the lasting effects of inequality that is not finished growing?
Should we send that to?
I'll take
Yeah,
any
so
answer.
yeah, so I mean, I'll take a stab at it. So, what's difficult for us is that we had such great momentum going into the break. I mean, every single indicator we were seeing across our district was just looking up, including we got some star data just before the Christmas break from our high schools that just completely outperformed the state. I mean, it wasn't even close, double-digit outperformance of the state. And so, Becca, I think about this a lot, and that's why, when I talk about our guiding principles, one of them is that we really want our children to be in our schools, and we want our children to be as much as possible with our teachers, because that's where we've seen the success. What we're right now thinking about is, so first of all, our plan is not to remediate. One of the things that we always say, in K-12, and we do this. It's like if you're lost and somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, I know how you can get to your location faster. Just slow down. Just slow down. Don't go faster." Well, that doesn't work. You'll never get to your location, and that's what we tend to do in K-12. We tend to remediate, and we water things down for our kids. So what our team is working on right now, and we're very blessed. We have Patti Salzman. We have an amazing team of staff around her, and really our teachers have really responded very positively to our professional development. So one of the goals is to work with our teachers directly and really look at grade by grade level, subject by subject. What are the key skills that children really need? Because we know that even before this pandemic hit, the majority of our students, over 60%, were already still behind because of their issues of poverty. So and this is something that our teachers have been dealing with for years. So how do we look at what we're teaching in our instruction to have a little more focus on some of those what I call essential skills is one part of it, and then working with our teachers on how we implement that. The other is how do we ensure that when we do our hybrid learning, that it has to be high quality. And one of the things we know right now is that we have, for example, our secondary students, then the majority of them are actually excelling. They're actually excelling in our hybrid or digital environment. And so, what are some lessons that we can learn? Now, it's not 100%. It's not, and I want it to be more consistent. But I think there's some valuable lessons that we can learn. So for older students, we think the hybrid model can really work. For younger children, I definitely feel that we need to have them in classes. We need to have them in our classrooms. And so that's some of the scenario thinking that we're looking at, is how do we achieve that in this COVID time.
I think another element that we have to become much more aware of and start creating opportunities is for parents to get training in educating their own children. We always say, oh, the parents are the first teachers, and they are. But when it comes to academics, do we supply them with enough tools? Do we make sure that they have enough background to know what might be expected of them as a parent? We had a meeting with one organization where they were asking us to do something about training parents. Now, our district has picked up on that, but also realized it a while back that that's an important element. Having more of our parents learn about digital learning, using a device, and letting that become a resource, a real tool to help us get through these times when there's going to be this kind of a situation, this kind of a crisis, but then also strengthen the parent to be able to tune into doing more with the child at home as children go back to school, but really realize that they are not where they ought to be. What can we do, again, to help parents become more prepared to be that home teacher?
Emily, what's the conversation right now? How much conversation have you guys had in the newsroom about the role of one of the roles that we play as journalists is getting information out there on any measurements that are like STAR tests. Every August there's a rush to report, who made gains, what the scores are. And obviously, you hope that it's more nuanced than just, the scores. But has there been any have you had any meaningful discussion with school leaders or other reporters or educators about how we report on the quality of what's being given to the kids in a way that fulfills our role as kind of the fourth estate accountability for these schools?
I would say that yes, there have been conversations, but the big thing that keeps coming up is what a challenge it is to assess every single student. Because even if you're given the exact same assignments, we see varying levels of engagement in every single school, classroom, even for students from week to week. And I think that's going to be a really big question, is how school districts and schools look at the performance of this period of time and assess where each student was. Because I can't imagine what that's like to go from, the week before spring break to back into the school year and saying, okay, let's start back as if it was a normal school year. I think it's going to have to look a lot different for instruction. And there's going to have to be a really critical thinking process about how they adjust for every individual student. Because as we all know, the gaps that were there widened, and individual challenges just became paramount for certain students. So I think that's the big question. I'm curious what you have heard from your conversations that you've had about that and what you view that role as.
And Emily, I think you have another reporter in the room with you.
Emily, are you wrestling a dog down there?
Yeah.
You can hear his collar shaking.
Famous dog. What's the Instagram?
It's a speckled Sawyer dog. He's very famous with his 61 followers.
All right. Good. All right.
Well, I'm hearing, so there was a discussion at the national level in early April, about, okay, we got to start getting everybody's login data. We got to start looking at, how do we measure what schools are offering? Because again, it goes to this school focus versus student focus. A lot of, this is difficult. And I think SAISD has been an example of not using poverty in recent years, not using poverty as an excuse not to challenge the students and not to give them top-notch instruction. That has been a message that has gone out, is we are going to stop using our children's circumstances as an excuse not to give them high quality instruction. Well, now in this time, everybody is facing a challenge. Everybody's saying, oh, but it's so hard. It's so hard. And journalists are starting to say, I know, but you have to try. It's our job to say who's trying or who's succeeding. And it's not necessarily to shame anybody, but to say, look, this school district has it figured out, do it. And it was kind of, for me, it almost looked like what I've heard from that tension for high poverty districts of, this is difficult, this is more difficult for us, and yet we're still going to do it. Distance learning, remote learning is more difficult. And some districts nationally have thrown up their hands and said, well, we're not going to take attendance. And what that amounts to is not all measurement is punitive necessarily. There's some measurement of, are you still offering things to kids? Are your kids still engaged? Are you engaging them? And that has been a huge conflict that kind of blossomed at the national level of, if we start measuring this, are we judging kids for not logging on because when they may need to be going to work to support their family? No, that's a different conversation than, is the school district offering engaging distance learning? So I'm hearing a lot of that.
I find it so troubling when, attendance isn't being taken, because I think that's the easiest way to discount any student that's students that are facing the most hardships. I think identifying who's not there is the first step to being able to say, okay, we need to track down these students. And then I think also there's a tremendous need for, I think, school boards, and we saw this in SAISD at the last meeting, really pushing and saying, well, how are we trying to reach these other students? How are we trying to reach these thousands? Every single one of those students, then, if they're not in touch with their teachers, you can only imagine what is going on. I mean, not having instruction for 2 months, we know what that does in the summer, and then compounding that with an additional 2 months in the regular school year. I think that's a very troubling thing. So I hope that everyone's holding each other accountable, and the response is just not, we're doing the best we can, and don't ask the questions.
So shameless plug, on Tuesday, I have a story coming out about SAISD teachers hunting down their last students.
Great.
They've been kind enough to give me access to the amazing, not just classroom teachers, but band leaders and other folks who are hunting down their fellow students. And it is a daunting. I listening to them talk, I was overwhelmed by how difficult that would be, and yet they did it, and they're doing it, and that says something.
You know, one question I was asked before I even started the thing, and it applies to the high school level, to collegiate level, is how to do athletics. How are y'all been training the athletic potential in the fall and the winter on the university level, and also on the high school level, and probably even the junior high? But that's such an important thing for so many families and obviously college athletes. How are you managing that compared to other operations that are probably a little bit more important in the grand scheme of things? So
I'm anxious to hear what Pedro is going to say about K through 12, but at college level, you know, the challenge is the NCAA. Trinity is a Division III school. We have students who are also athletes. We do not have any athletic scholarships, but we are a real powerhouse school in terms of Division III athletics. Some great championships under our belt, and so I just love all the activity that happens when our incredible students are out there, you know, combining their academics and their athletics. But the challenge right now is that the NCAA has said that the re-socialization of athletics is going to depend upon local conditions. And so everywhere people are waiting to hear, what is your state or what is your county going to say about contact sport, different kind of things that may be going on. And that we all need to be responsive to listen to what those local public health guidelines are going to be. In the interim, as we're waiting on more information, all of the different conferences are meeting. And so we're in conversations with our athletic conferences. And right now, the best speculation is that probably athletics are going to be far more regional than they were last year. Teams may not travel as much. They won't travel as far. There'd be much greater awareness about safety of local conditions, the health of teams, you know, all kinds of things that you would be doing to monitor how safe is it to participate. So the thought is that there will be an effort to have athletic seasons, but they're going to look different in their scope than they did in the past. That means that also, you know, people are debating, so how do you determine championships? How will different kinds of playoffs go? And I think all of that is still being worked out based on waiting for more information.
I have one Trinity hat that I wear, and it's the national championship hat from I think 2005 or 2001. Football national championship hat. That's one I wear that working out every time I run. So you do have.
Thank you for repping. I love it.
All right, Pedro, what are y'all thinking about when it comes to athletics in school districts? Hold on. I got you.
Okay. So first of all, we know how important extracurriculars, including athletics, are to our students. So we are waiting for UIL to give us guidance. They're starting to give a little bit of guidance. And so I'm going to be an optimist. You know, we saw the NFL just put out their season schedule for next fall. So they gave me a little bit of a sense of hope. I'm hearing also about even, you know, some states are allowing sporting events without audiences, including basketball. So we're going to keep watching it. But right now, what's happening is actually we're following what UIL is the guidance they're giving us. And so, for example, we're having Zoom classes with our athletes around conditioning. So we can't bring them into our gyms, which is what we like to do, but we can do things over Zoom. So their coaches are actually connecting with them And then we're hoping that as we get into the summer, we'll be allowed to do some activities out in our fields. But we think UIL will be giving us guidance in the next couple of weeks. And so we're hoping that as the summer progresses, we'll be allowed to do more things. And by the way, one of the things that my fine arts teachers remind me, fine arts are directly connected with our sports. So many times, like the band and many of those programs are all connected to our activities or on the flex. And so when we have restrictions on our sports, we also have restrictions on our large fine art programs. And so they're both anxious to get started.
No, I'd imagine those students, and it also just helps their, like, honestly, mental health and the way they activity and the way they express their creativity.
It's why a lot of them show up at school.
Yeah.
I mean, the research shows that extracurriculars play a huge role in how engaged students are across the board. That's what I was talking to this band director about for the stories. He said, look, he's holding synchronous Zoom classes every day. He said, because this was what kept kids engaged before. I have no reason to believe that that has changed. This is what they show up for. And I think it also has given us, an opportunity to celebrate, and maybe this might be a fun note to end on.
Sure, but before we do that, hold that thought, because I do want to get to the panel. We're going to go around the room for our closing remarks, but I do want to shout out to a few people who made some great comments. Liz said this, and I'm going to show you. I really appreciate the panelists' sense of optimism and their vision and commitment to the possibilities that this experience has opened up. And I also love the focus on a community at the center of our solutions and creativity as an essential element in all of our responses. Great panel. And then one more comment from, if I can get to it here. This is going back to the question, Bekah. I have an answer to that question, and that was childcare, counseling, emotional needs, and of all of our kids and families, safety plans for our families, teacher and staff health and safety, kind of the same stuff I always lobby for and ask about. That was for the lobbying question. And a great comment, Rebecca. Thank you for all who are watching, and thank you for your comments. And we'll go back to your final thought.
So one of the things that I am enjoying is seeing we talk a lot about the inequities that, yes, we knew were there, and now they are impossible to ignore. The things that we didn't realize were as bad as they were, all of those things. I have been really delighting to see some of the things that were better than we thought they were. The relationships that were stronger, the roles that were more essential. Talking to this band leader and seeing the role that he played in finding kids, it made me just think this person's job seems so much more essential now. In the way we talk about essential workers in our larger society, the bus drivers that I've gotten to talk to, the food service people. I would love to hear everyone just celebrate one, kind of who's been your COVID hero in your world, in your system. What role do you have an increased appreciation for? Maybe someone who you always thought, oh, it's great that they do that job, but you see the importance of their job in a whole new light. That's what I'd like to end on.
All right, we'll start with Patti.
Well, it's hard to nail it down to one. I'm certainly very inspired by those people who are on the front line giving out the food to the children. It was 5 days a week with food for 5 days. Now it's 3 days a week, but food for 7 days, for the families, and the enthusiasm and the spirit that they have, and that they don't really want to stop. They enjoy seeing the parents come by, and sometimes the children with them. It means a whole lot to them, and just that beautiful connectedness, and that they're willing to continue doing this. That's one of many things. I was so inspired by teachers who did these wonderful videos when we were first doing the virtual learning, and They did a great video, like, get ready, we're starting Monday, and so many teachers involved in it, and other people that have done things like that. Bonham that did a video with staff about washing hands and keeping apart and all the rules for health safety. Again, so many people from so many different pockets of responsibility in our district that have shown. Those are just a couple of them, but I have a list here if you want more.
I bet you do. Pedro, what about you?
Well, I'm gonna cheat like Miss Radle because I couldn't pick one person either. I just been inspired by, we've done a lot of videos, and when you just hear, our bus drivers, our custodial staff, our food service workers, actually our IT technicians, we grew our help desk from 3 people now to over 15 people, and they all now see their roles as really helping us transform the community, as helping us deal with these inequities. And of course, our teachers. As Ms. Radle said, we unleashed creativity across all of our teachers. And it was just amazing to see the different lesson plans, the videos, the way they reached out to children. It was just very, very heartwarming. And when the lesson that I learned is that our teachers miss their children, miss their students. And so I would just say, and then finally our parents, because, during these times, it is harder than ever to be a parent. And I am a good, and I'm a good, and I know that's happening in my house. And so all of us are struggling. How do we navigate this world of COVID with children at home that were not meant to be at home? They're not meant to stay, at home locked up. That's just not how children are wired. And so we as parents have known that, but now we know it more than ever. And we know now more than ever that teachers make us better parents. Because by having that respite when they're in their classrooms, it's a respite for us as parents. So I would, all those are my heroes.
Thanks for that. Dr. Anderson.
So I give you 2 quick answers. One of them is, it was pretty incredible to see the IT staff, Trinity, make an incredible transformation. They not only helped all of our faculty members get their technology ready so that they could do remote teaching, but they helped the university go to do remote work. And there were a lot of moving pieces and all of that. And there was a team that collaborated with them at a teaching and learning center we have called The Collaborative. And overnight, they put together a week-long of trainings to help all of our faculty members just instantly do things that no one had been preparing to do. So they were just phenomenal in what they did. The other group that I won't name, but there are individuals who get emails who sort of complain, the next time there's going to be a global pandemic and a global economic downturn, please consult with us a little bit more before you make a decision. And they very politely, take the criticism and say, we'll do our best. But they were real heroes keeping everything moving forward behind the scenes when it was a real crisis and there were only hours to plan to make changes.
Thanks for that. And Emily, where have you seen this?
Who's your hero?
2 came to mind. Well, I live in SAISD, and I live really close by to one of the bus stops where I think it's the SAISD stop where they pass out food every single morning. And I see my neighbors lining up every single day. And it's not just for the food, but that's their connection to the district. And I just find that so lovely and beautiful. And they fully take that responsibility on. And then the other one that I think about are childcare providers. And I know how essential their work is in allowing parents to go back to work or to have kept going to work this entire time. And I just really hope that childcare is an essential component of any discussion following this.
Amen.
That's good. Hey, and Hugo here said, my COVID hero is the SAISD leadership who inspire us to meet this challenge and give us the tools we need. Thank you all. And Rebecca says, amen to that. Happy to do it. And yes, God bless our IT department. When we were thinking about the IT department, is she an IT person?
No, I interviewed the head of IT for a story, the oral history of the pivot, which is a 27 website. And Ken Thompson is the most contagious, energetic person I have ever interviewed. And his description of the pivot made it sound like the greatest joy he's ever had rising to this challenge. And so when people are talking about their IT department, and he described going from 100 calls a day to 900 calls a day. And I've been one of those calls, SAISD parent. And always the most pleasant interactions, just lovely people, those IT people. They're really good.
No, and I know this is Pup Theology, so I'm going to drop one theological thing as my conclusion, and that's from 1 Corinthians 12, where Paul says the body is a unit, though it's made up of many parts. The hands and the feet and the head and other parts we can't even name. They are one body, right? And they all work together. And when I think of like the IT department and even people who clean our buildings and keep us safe, that's all part of education, right? In a church setting, that's all part of ministry. And a lot of times we think of, ministers are only ones that talk. Educators are only our teachers, right? Where we're learning that all these educators, all these people that influence each other are all part of this one body, even though we have different roles to give. And I think maybe coming out of this, we'll see that a little better, see that a little clearer, and really appreciate some of the people that sometimes are more behind the scenes, but without them, we could not survive. And hopefully that we kind of lift that up more and more as we move forward. And I want to thank all of our panelists. We went over our time by 20 minutes, but that's okay. I want to thank all of our panelists. Patti, you are one of my San Antonio heroes. Not only does she have one of the toughest jobs as a board president for a school district, she was previously a councilwoman and did an amazing job. But really her best of the best is the program she has with her husband at Inner City Development, and the great work you do. There are other organizations that spend millions to do the same output as Patti can do with a bunch of volunteers. And Inner City Development is a shining star in our city. And Superintendent Martinez, continue doing the wonderful job. Thank you for coming to be a friend of Pup Theology. You also have a very, very tough job with all the different angles that you have to worry about with students and teachers and parents. And all the things that you have to hold up, even without a crisis at hand. And so thank you for your wonderful leadership and your dedication to our school districts. Emily, thank you for reporting each and every day on this crisis, and all of the people at the Rivard Report. Thank you for keep it nonprofit, and all of us can read your articles. You go to rivardreport.com. There's no paywalls at the Rivard Report. You can always donate and keep that place going. They do a wonderful job. And Dr. Danny Anderson, thank you for being here from Trinity University. I can tell you, living in downtown San Antonio, when I meet somebody moving and shaking, like, hey, what do you do? Whether that's Mitch Hagney at the local Sprout Hub, or I'm just trying to think of Rocio Custer from the used to work at the Rivard Report. All these people I know, when I ask them where they went to school, I hear all the time, I went to Trinity and I stayed in San Antonio. There's so many great alumni at your university that stay in San Antonio. They don't move off to other places. They stay here and they do a wonderful job creating new businesses or just opportunities in our city. So thank you for that and your kindness and just what Trinity offers in our San Antonio neighborhood, and the town gown relationship that's sometimes also very complex. So thank you guys for all being here.
I think we're all very honored to be connected with the work that you're doing in the community and creating these conversations. Thank you all so much.
No, and I see it every day. That's the main job. My main job is working with the homelessness, and I see that also with the city. Everybody's coming together and for the common good, and that's what we're all about here, creating the common good at Pup Theology. So again, thank you for watching Pup Theology, another edition online. We hope to be back sometime soon at the Friendly Spot. Normally, when we've hosted Superintendent Pedro Martinez before, and hopefully again, Dr. Danny Anderson will be back at the Friendly Spot, supporting local, which reminds us, you can support local. This is Dorchel Brewery that we were failed at drinking. It's hard at an education panel to be chugging down a
right.
But also, what I also thought I appreciate about this panel, I have never felt like a pair of brown shoes and next to a black tuxedo before. I have like 4 amazing educators and education reporters around me, and I'm trying to say the word operationalize or something like that, or opportunalize. I was like, oh no, I feel like a politician getting answered a question and I can't even pronounce the word. So thank you for guys being smarter than me so we can have this conversation. So good night, everybody, and God bless.
Good night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.